Why is it so flipping hard to complete your first draft? Here we all are, guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, while I'm not a massive or particularly acclaimed author, I'm a writer who's managed to complete the process of writing and publishing, self-publishing their first book. So I want to make this video as hopefully a bit of practical advice and also serve as encouragement as well for those currently trying to complete the first draft of their first ever book. Now, completing a first draft is a bloody painful experience. You're going to need a mighty fat cushion behind your back because you're probably going to be breaking it during this process. Now, much like good long-term investing, writing for what it really is isn't very sexy at all. It's about as sexy as when you're having a mad rave in a club and then the lights come on at 5 AM and you can see everyone's sweaty faces in startling clarity. You see what you've just been necking on for the past few hours and it ain't particularly pretty. That's what's writing your first draft is. However, I can give you 5 pointers to bear in mind when going about writing your first draft so that it doesn't become another unfinished manuscript that gathers dust and rot. So first of all, there are some realities that we all have to come to terms with when we're writing our first draft. These are realities that at some point in the process you're gonna face. The first one being is that your writing's rubbish, that what you've got so far is absolutely awful and it is not worth publishing to the rest of the world. Now, this is potentially perfectionism at play right here. You have an aspiration, an ideal of what your writing will be like, how good it could potentially be if you get it right. But remember that that image of your story in your head right now isn't a string of sentences that are made up by words. It is just literally ideals. The real challenge is transferring those ideas into words, and it might not look as good as you want it to, but it needs to actually exist. You can't sell an ideal. Books don't contain abstract ideals, they contain actual words. Next, your motivation will dwindle drastically. You might not be surprised to hear this. This is because writing a book is in many ways a sprint, but in many ways a marathon as well. You've got to have the discipline to show up and write even when you don't feel like it. You've got to utilise a fair bit of willpower. And even on those days where you really don't want to do anything, when you really don't have the creative juices flowing, you've just got to literally show up. And then finally, you will want to change things over and over. Literally, as you're writing, your brain is also plotting ideas. It's thinking of different ways to do things, better ways to do things, or it might be critiquing what you've already done. Inevitably, it's both. Now, with this, you've got to remember that the first draft is just a literal brain dump of ideas and hoping that they make some kind of sense by the end of it. So it's okay to change things over and over. We'll talk about this more in a minute. But those are the realities that we got to face. Once you face them, you can get more stuck in to actually making progress with your manuscript. So the second key area of success in making sure you get this manuscript finished is deciding what kind of writer you are. Are you going to be a gusher or are you going to be an eker? Now, with gushers, they tend to write freely without stopping, literally just getting all the ideas onto the paper, not really worrying about the specifics so much, just literally getting the ideas down. So they've got something to mould, to something to play with when they come to revising it. There's going to be lots of revisions, lots of rounds of editing, because you're going to take a massive load of brain dumped ideas and turn them into something hopefully much better. With ekers, they tend to write very few words at a time, but each and every single word has a lot of thought behind it. Every sentence has to serve a purpose, and they're consciously thinking about the impact and the necessity and the value of every single word that they write. It makes the process much slower, takes a lot more time and a lot more energy, in my opinion. And this focus on details means that there's less rounds of revision afterwards. Ekers tend to take much more time to actually finish that first draft. And a lot of the time with ekers as well is that there's perfectionism coming into it. How much you allow your perfectionism to come into your work is something you need to get a real idea on. Is it becoming detrimental to finishing your work? Because a good bit of perfectionism can take us a long way. It can really make us achieve more of our work, to go further. But if you allow it to do too much, then you're going to be going at a snail's pace and you might eventually lose the motivation to continue because it's such a frustrating ordeal. The reason it's important to identify what kind of writer you are is because you want to get an accurate idea. You want to get a concrete plan on how you're going to go about writing this manuscript in your schedule for the next few months or however long it's going to take. Personally, I have a quota on how many words I need to write in a day. At the moment, it's 1,000. However, when I was writing Running for Success, that adrenaline and raw energy for getting my first book done meant I was doing 2,000 words a day, and it was an almighty sprint for a month and a few weeks to get that first draft done. And in the end, it was extremely rough, but it was finished, and for the first time ever I could say I actually had a manuscript complete. You need to find what's realistic for you in one sitting and commit to it. You can take days off, you can take weekends off. At the moment I'm taking weekends off, but never miss a day in which you'll say you're going to write. Because the more time you allow yourself to have off, the chances are you'll lose that kind of mode of thinking you get into when you're planning ideas. And by the time you come back to it, there's the worry that you'll forget about your plot. You won't be quite as immersed into the world that you're trying to create. And that's not going to have a good effect on your final product. The thing is, base these estimations of how long it's going to take you, how your schedule is going to unfold, by your own personal preferences, not what other writers say. You've got Stephen King saying you should spend no more than a season on writing your first manuscript. But then again, other writers can take 2 years or longer to finish their first draft. But it does really help to have a concrete idea of how long it's going to take, how long you're going to be expending this energy for to write and get it done. And in many ways, this is where I link it to a marathon in my book, where it helps to know how long you're going to be working at such an intensity for. And once you have a realistic idea in mind, it becomes much easier to get yourself to that finish line. Personally, I'm a massive gusher. I have to take my lexical penis, squeeze it, and just get the ideas out there. Just get them on the screen. Get them out there. Got to get on the page for me, otherwise it's going to stay up here and it's going to get replaced by what's for dinner tonight or something. I've just got to get my ideas out there. And it might be absolutely horrendous. There might be more artistic value in a 14-year-old's tweet, but you've got something to work with. And for me, that's really important. I went through massive stages of editing, long and intensive, but I had something to work with in the process, and in previous projects I've kind of given up because it's just taken me too long and I've been too critical of myself along the way. Stuff to bear in mind. The third step relates to the reality of your ideas will change. And to elaborate on this further, if you're doing this, if you're going through this writing process properly, then when you come to editing it, you'll have a developmental, a line edit, a copy edit, and a proofreading as well. You'll be going through lots of different stages. So play with ideas as you go, just get them down there. And then when it comes to the edit, you can then formulate these into what makes sense, what is more logical, what works best, what's more interesting. You can think about that later, just get the ideas down. And as you're writing, you'll find that your brain isn't just focused on typing the words up, but it's also formulating ideas. The cogs are just turning from writing alone. Getting one idea down, you might suddenly get a better one, or you might start thinking ahead in the story. Just get those bloody fingers moving. Oh, I'm a bit passive aggressive, you know. Sorry guys. And this is also another fact that you've got to remember, is that whether you're a gusher or an eker, no matter what pace you're going at, you're going to be editing this book afterwards anyway. So it doesn't matter how much effort you put into the first draft, you're going to be changing parts of it anyway. And if you're a perfectionist as well, no matter how much effort you put into that first draft, you're going to want to tinker parts afterwards. Either way, there's still plenty to go after the first draft, but for goodness sake, get it done. Now, an awful first draft is better than no first draft, because at least we got something to work with. Because from there we can mould it into something more refined, more polished, and more beautiful as a piece of work. There is so much potential with what you've already got than rather having a blank page. You've literally just got to get over the line. This is undoubtedly the biggest slog of the writing process. It's more intensive than any part, even the marketing. The marketing can be an absolute pain in the bumhole, but the writing itself is a real slog, and we just got to be aware of that. It's got to be done. Without it, there's no book. And the fourth key to success is a very technical aspect, actually. And one thing that I did when I was writing my first book is to add a bit of variety to your formatting and the layout of your page as you actually go. And what I mean by this is change the font around, perhaps even change the indentation on the paragraphs, change the font size, and just keep what you're looking at a bit fresh. You can even just change the margins so it looks like what it's going to look like on the real page. Or you can even just write into an actual template. The reason I say this is because it's very encouraging to see literally what your book's going to look like as if it was already finished. That can be encouraging. You know, they say variety is the spice of life. Well, for a long process like this, it certainly helps. At the moment, I've got the default settings on the Word document I'm using. I've got it in Calibri. I've changed none of the font size. And the reason for this is because my current work on my second book is extremely rough, completely all over the place. And I want to remind myself that it's very rough work which will be refined and formatted and perfected later. Being little things like this just help me keep my perfectionism at bay. But on the other hand, you want to get an idea, you want that encouragement of, oh, this is what it's going to look like when it's done. So find what works for you. Finally, fifth key to success, and it's just a little practical tip. On the hardest days when absolutely nothing comes to mind and you're just staring at a blank screen with seemingly no hope and you're getting annoyed at yourself, let your mind wander. And what I mean by this is just start typing any words onto a page, any ideas, anything, even however your day's going, or a mood. Write something. Now, I alluded to this earlier because when you're literally writing, your brain is turning the cogs and ideas are starting to form, and you can get yourself into that writing mood. Some days are going to be better than others, but you've got to make that commitment to yourself and you've got to show up and you just got to get it done. It is a hard process, but undoubtedly it's one of the most worthwhile things I've ever done, and it's a thrill and it's a sense of achievement that I hope to be getting again soon once I finish my second book, and hopefully many more in the future. So if you've got any tips on how you finish your first draft, or if you want to share your experiences, how your current writing process is going, leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you found any of this advice useful, do consider subscribing or giving a like. My name is Ellis Warren, and I'm a self-published writer and runner who likes to share content for the creative-minded individual. If that appeals to you, do consider subscribing. Until then, guys, take care out there, and I'll see you next time.